The ceiling screamed before it gave way. Metal tore like paper. Fluorescent lights swung shattered and rained glass over aisle 7. Danny Rhodes threw his body over 2 kids and felt the air get sucked out of the building. He tasted dust and blood. The wind roared like a freight train as the front windows of the grocery store exploded inward. The boy in the wheelchair was pinned between Danny's arm and a fallen display of canned beans, his wide eyes locked on the funnel cloud, twisting in the parking lot. Danny could hear his daughter, Maya, sobbing into his chest, her small fingers digging into his jacket. Somewhere above them, steel beams groaned again, threatening to drop the rest of the roof. Emergency lights flickered. The tornado sirens outside were swallowed by the sound of the storm chewing its way through the strip mall. In the chaos over the howl of wind and screaming shoppers, Danny heard a sound he recognized from another life, a structure about to fail. He had 10 seconds to move these kids, or they'd be buried alive. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from tonight and hit that like and subscribe button if you believe courage still matters in this world. Just that morning, Danny had been a tired 37-year-old dad, wiping grease off his hands at the city bus depot in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He'd clocked out after a double shift, shoulders aching from leaning over engines that should have been retired 10 years ago, and checked his cracked phone to see a text from his landlord, "Rent's late again." "We need to talk." Danny lived in a faded 2-bedroom on the edge of town, the kind of place where the paint peeled and the neighbors worked nights. It was just him and Maya now. His wife Lena had been gone for 3 years, taken by a drunk driver on a rainy Sunday afternoon. Since then, Danny's whole life had shrunk to 3 things: keep Maya safe, keep a roof over their heads, and keep his head down. Most people at the depot knew him as the quiet mechanic who could coax 1 more month out of a dying transmission. What they didn't know or didn't care to ask was that before buses and overdue notices, Danny had served as a combat engineer in the Army. He'd learned how buildings fail, how wind and pressure move, how to read the way steel talks right before it snaps. He didn't talk about it. Maya was the one bright, noisy thing in his life. 9 years old, gap-toothed curly hair always escaping her ponytail. She kept a sketchbook of buses and future houses she swore she'd buy for them one day. She saw her dad as the strongest person on earth, even when she caught him staring too long at the stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen table. That Thursday, the weather app said severe thunderstorm watch. In Oklahoma, that was just another day. School let out early, and the pantry at home was down to 2 boxes of mac and cheese and a half bag of rice. So Danny did what every other working parent in town did. He swung by the big discount grocery store off Highway 64 with Maya in tow, planning to stretch $40 into a week of meals. By the time they hit the canned goods aisle, the sky outside had turned the color of bruised ink. The store intercom crackled with a bored voice. "Attention shoppers, we are now under a tornado warning. Please move away from windows and follow staff instructions." Most people grumbled, checked their phones, kept shopping. Danny didn't. He felt that old training wake up in his bones. He grabbed Maya's hand, scanned for the safest interior spot, and that's when he saw the boy in the motorized wheelchair stuck near the front doors, his caregiver frantic and frozen. The first gust hit. The lights dimmed. Glass began to vibrate in its frames. Danny knew, in a way, most people never would, that they had seconds before everything changed. So he let go of his cart, tightened his grip on Maya's hand, turned toward that frightened boy in the chair, and walked straight into the storm. The wind died as suddenly as it had come, leaving behind a groaning building and a silence so sharp it made Danny's ears ring. Dust drifted through the air like ash. Somewhere behind the bakery counter, a woman was sobbing into her apron. The boy in the wheelchair clung to Danny's sleeve, while Maya pressed her cheek to his chest, trying to steady her breathing. "Dad, is it over?" she whispered. He didn't answer right away. His eyes traced the twisted metal above them, the hairline cracks in the nearest beam, the pulsing exit signs flickering like they were running out of courage. The roof had lost integrity, but he didn't know how much longer it would hold. The worst of the tornado had passed, yes, but the danger wasn't gone. Not even close. A store manager in a vest 2 sizes too big came running toward them, waving a walkie-talkie and shouting at everyone to move to the stockroom. He pointed at Danny, anger sharp in his voice. "Hey, you can't block the aisle like that. We've got protocols. If something happens, it's on you." Danny blinked at him. He had just shielded 3 kids from a collapsing ceiling, and that was the man's first reaction. The manager looked down at the dented cans and shattered shelving around them and clicked his tongue like Danny had caused an inconvenience. "Come on," the man snapped. "If you can walk, you can move." Maya stiffened. The boy in the wheelchair shrank into himself. Danny wanted to say something that would quiet the tremor in his ribs, but he swallowed it. He'd learned long ago that some people mistake kindness for weakness and humility for permission. There were bigger problems here than a man who wanted to look like he was in charge. He angled himself protectively around the kids. "Where's the safest place?" he asked. The manager rolled his eyes. "Like I said, stockroom. Big room, no windows. Now hurry up." Customers slowly filed toward the back, whispering, shaking, carrying the weight of adrenaline in their hands. Danny helped the boy maneuver his chair through the debris, clearing a path where he could. A few people muttered impatiently behind him, trying to squeeze past. "Move it," one man barked. "He's going as fast as he can," Danny said evenly. The man just snorted and shoved ahead. Maya's hand tightened around his. "Why are they acting like that?" she murmured. He didn't answer. She already knew. When they reached the stockroom, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, half of them burned out. Cardboard towers swayed uneasily on metal racks. The air smelled like spilled detergent and ozone. A cluster of store employees huddled near the punch clock, scrolling their phones, whispering about insurance claims and whether they'd still get paid for the day. Someone from management shiny shoes clipboard, the whole thing strode straight up to Danny the moment he entered. The man didn't ask if anyone was injured, didn't ask what had happened at the front of the store, didn't even glance at the boy in the wheelchair whose hands were trembling. Instead, he said, "I need to know who interfered with the store's emergency plan out there." Danny blinked. "Interfered, yes," the man said, tapping his clipboard. "We have designated safe zones. Liability is our top concern right now. Witnesses say you didn't follow staff direction." Maya looked up at her dad, eyes wide and confused, like she was trying to understand why a grown man would choose cruelty on purpose. Danny kept his voice calm. There were falling beams, broken glass, a child unable to move. "I made sure they weren't crushed." "That's not the point," the man snapped. "We have procedures for a reason." The boy in the wheelchair whispered, "He saved me," but the manager didn't seem to hear or care. Danny could feel the room watching him, judgment drifting in from strangers who didn't see what he saw, who couldn't know the calculations running through his head when the ceiling buckled. People who wanted someone to blame because blame felt easier than fear. He met the manager's stare. "Your procedures weren't fast enough," he said simply. A muscle in the manager's jaw twitched. "We'll deal with this later." Maya tugged on her father's sleeve. "Dad, did we do something wrong?" His heart cracked quietly. She asked it so softly, like she was afraid of the answer. He knelt beside her, brushing dust from her hair. No, sweetheart. Not one thing. Behind them, the store's assistant manager joined the discussion at the clipboard, whispering in harsh tones, giving Danny the kind of look reserved for people who break rules, not for people who stop disasters. The tension in the room thickened. Someone said they needed statements for insurance. Someone else muttered that some folks just want to play hero. People always filled silence with nonsense when they didn't know how to be grateful. The boy in the wheelchair, whose name Danny still didn't know, turned to him with watery eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, voice shaking. "I thought I was gonna die out there." Danny nodded once, steady. "Not on my watch." But the moment lingered heavy and raw, because while one boy saw him clearly, the adults in charge saw only inconvenience. Emergency crews arrived 20 minutes later. Firefighters and paramedics swept through the stockroom, checking for injuries. A young paramedic approached Danny. "You with the ceiling collapse group?" she asked. "They said someone shielded 3 kids." Danny lifted a hand. "That was us." Her eyes softened. "You probably saved their lives. We're gonna need to check you for concussion and glass cuts." Before Danny could reply, the store manager cut in sharply. "Actually, before he goes anywhere, I need his full name for liability forms." The paramedic frowned. "Sir, we're triaging patients." "Well, maybe if certain individuals hadn't ignored staff instructions, the front of the store wouldn't look like a war zone," the manager snapped. That was it. The words landed like a slap. Even the paramedic's eyebrows shot up. Danny said nothing, though his knuckles tightened around Maya's small hand. The weight of years, the long nights, the quiet grief, the swallowed anger settled against his ribs. He wasn't a man who lost his temper. Loss had already taken too much from him. But there was a limit to swallowing injustice. The boy's caregiver, who had been silent until now, finally stepped forward. "I saw what he did," she said firmly. "If he hadn't gotten to us, we'd be under 6 inches of roof right now." The manager brushed her off. "We'll handle this through corporate." Corporate. Danny couldn't help a bitter exhale. The man talked like someone who believed paperwork mattered more than people. The paramedic stepped between them. "He comes with me," she said, her voice edged with steel. "Now." That could have ended it. But it didn't. As the paramedic guided Danny toward a cleared area, a sheriff's deputy entered the stockroom, speaking with the store leadership. Danny didn't hear the whole conversation, only fragments, the kind that tightened your stomach even if you weren't guilty of a thing. Property damage, eyewitness reports, ignoring instructions, might need to file. Danny felt Maya look up at him again, her face pale. "Dad, are they mad at you?" He forced a steady breath. "Sometimes people get scared and start pointing fingers, baby. Don't you worry." But he was worried. Not for himself, he'd take whatever came. He worried for what Maya would carry away from this room, for how it would shape her understanding of the world, for the way she watched adults attack the person who had protected her. He sat on an overturned crate while the paramedic cleaned a cut on his temple. Maya leaned against him, quiet, in a way that didn't belong to a child. Around them, customers whispered. A few openly stared. One man shook his head like Danny was some reckless fool instead of the reason 3 kids were standing upright. Each murmur, each sideways glance pressed heavier on his shoulders. He wished he could take Maya outside, show her the sky clearing, remind her that storms didn't last forever. But they weren't allowed to leave yet. He had nothing to defend himself with except the truth, yet no one seemed interested in it. The sheriff's deputy finally approached. "Sir, I'll need you to come answer a few questions about what happened up front." The tone wasn't hostile, but it wasn't friendly either. Danny stood slowly, feeling the weight of the room rise with him. Maya clung tighter, her small voice fragile. Do you have to go? He placed a hand on her back. Just for a minute. But as he stepped forward, the lights flickered again, once, twice. Then a loud, metallic crack echoed from somewhere above the stockroom ceiling. Everyone froze. Danny's heart punched once against his ribs. He knew that sound. The first storm hadn't been the last. Not for the building. And whatever happened next was going to demand more than quiet strength. It was going to demand action. The crack above them didn't sound like ordinary settling. It was sharp, metallic, followed by a low groan that shuddered through the concrete floor, like the building was dragging in a final breath. Every head jerked upward at once. Cardboard boxes trembled on their pallets. Dust sifted down through the seams in the ceiling tiles. The paramedic whispered, "Oh no." Danny didn't need to guess. He knew that sound in his bones, the buckling of tension rods, the warping of structural steel that had taken too much weather and too little maintenance. The tornado had chewed through the front of the store, and now the pressure change in the stockroom was finishing the job. It was the same kind of sound he'd heard once overseas, right before a warehouse roof collapsed under artillery shockwaves. He'd survived that day because of instinct speed and a sergeant who'd screamed at him to move before he'd even understood why. That sergeant wasn't here now. Another crack snapped overhead louder this time. A ceiling tile fell and shattered near the back wall, sending people scrambling. The assistant manager yelped and dropped his clipboard. The sheriff's deputy, the one who'd come to question him, stepped back with wide eyes. Everybody stay calm, but nobody stayed calm. The crowd surged toward the door all at once, a panicked wave of bodies pushing and tripping and yelling. The boy in the wheelchair looked trapped again, his caregiver fighting the crowd to keep him from tipping. Maya pressed herself into Danny's side, trembling so hard he could feel her ribs shudder. "It's okay," he murmured, but his eyes stayed locked on the highest rack, where a steel crossbeam bowed more every second. If that came down, the whole western section would pancake. People didn't see it. They saw falling ceiling tiles and dust, but they didn't see the real danger, the racks loaded with thousands of pounds of dry goods ready to collapse like dominoes. Danny grabbed Maya's shoulders and crouched low so she could see his face. "Stay with the paramedic, okay? Don't move from her." Her eyes filled instantly. "Dad, I'll be right there," he said, steady but urgent. "Right there." He turned to the paramedic. "Get her to the east wall, now. And get that kid in the wheelchair over there too. It's the only part that'll hold." The paramedic didn't argue. She'd seen his eyes focused unshaken, like he could already see the collapse before it happened. She scooped Maya's hand into hers and shouted for the caregiver to follow. But the crowd kept pushing in the opposite direction toward the single exit door, like cattle in a chute. Danny saw it unfolding. If they kept shoving like that, the doorframe could jam, or someone could fall, blocking everyone behind them. Panic would do the rest. People would suffocate in the crush. And overhead, the long steel beam gave another tortured groan. He felt something crack open inside him, not fear, not anger, but a fierce clarity. The same clarity that had saved him overseas, that had kept him steady the day Lena died, even though the world had gone sideways. It didn't matter who blamed him, who sneered, who said he had ignored protocol. None of that mattered next to the simple truth. He wasn't letting anyone die today. He vaulted onto a low pallet of boxed detergent and cupped his hands around his mouth. "Stop moving." His voice slammed through the room like a command from a different world. The crowd jolted, startled. Even the manager froze. "There's a load-bearing beam failing above the west racks," Danny shouted, pointing. "If you keep rushing that door, somebody's going to get crushed. Move to the east wall, now." A few people hesitated. Some stared at him like he was crazy. But then another violent creak ripped through the ceiling, louder and deeper than before, like the groan of a dying animal. That did it. Someone yelled, "He's right, move!" and the crowd split, redirecting toward the east wall. The deputy helped barking orders, clearing a path around fallen boxes. The paramedic waved them over urgently. People started following her, the fear in their eyes finally channeling into something useful. Danny jumped off the pallet and ran straight into the danger zone. "Sir, what are you doing?" the assistant manager screamed after him. Danny didn't even look back. A pile of collapsed shelving blocked a whole row, trapping 2 employees who'd ducked under it earlier. One was a teenager with a name tag that said Marco. The other a stock clerk with a bleeding arm pinned between cases of cereal. "Help us!" the teenager shouted, voice cracking. Danny dropped to his knees beside the fallen rack. He tested the metal. Too heavy to lift completely, but maybe he could shift the angle. The ceiling above them popped again, 3 sharp snaps like gunfire. He braced his shoulder under the frame and pushed. His muscles screamed. Sweat broke across his forehead. "Pull your arm when I say," he grunted to the stock clerk. 3, 2, 1 now. The clerk yanked his arm free with a howl. Danny let the rack slam back down, barely avoiding his foot, then helped both injured employees crawl toward safety. Another ceiling tile cracked loose and shattered inches from his hand. "Go!" he shouted. "Get to the east wall." They limped off as fast as they could. He turned and saw the beam finally buckle. It happened in slow motion, metal bending like warm taffy before snapping all at once. A chunk of ceiling the size of a truck hood broke away and started to fall toward a group of shoppers who hadn't cleared the area yet. No time. No chance to shout. No one else close enough. Danny sprinted. He slammed into the nearest metal cart, shoved it aside, and grabbed the back of a shelving unit bolted to the floor. He wrenched with everything he had, dragging the shelf 2 feet, just enough to create a pocket of space. "Get down!" he roared. 4 people dove beneath the overhang he'd created. The ceiling hit before they were even fully curled up. The impact shook his teeth. Debris crashed around him. Dust exploded upward. The air whooshed past his ears with a roar. Something sharp grazed his shoulder. He hit the ground hard, rolled behind the shelf, and shielded his head as fragments rained down. The noise was deafening. When the dust began to settle, Danny coughed and pushed himself onto his hands and knees. The section of roof had collapsed exactly where those 4 people had stood seconds earlier. The shelf he'd yanked off the wall now bore the weight of half a ceiling tile and a tangled mess of wiring. Someone to his right sobbed. One of the shoppers crawled out, shaking uncontrollably. You saved us!" Danny didn't answer. He was scanning for more trapped bodies. A firefighter burst into the room, then a tall, soot-streaked woman with a hose line over her shoulder. Her eyes swept the destruction and locked onto Danny. "Did you clear this area?" she shouted. He nodded once. "People are under that shelf. They're alive." "Holy hell," she breathed, stunned. She turned her head. "We need backup in stockroom. Structural failure on the west side. Civilian just prevented 4 fatalities." Danny winced. "Just doing what I could." Another firefighter arrived, then another. The deputy returned, eyes wide with disbelief. But Danny wasn't looking at any of them. His gaze shot to the east wall, where Maya stood clutching the paramedic's arm. Her face streaked with tears, but her body untouched. She saw him. And in that moment, dust still drifting around him like smoke from a battlefield, her expression changed from terror to something fierce and shining relief. Pride. Love so strong it nearly brought him to his knees. He rose slowly, brushing debris from his jeans, ignoring the sting in his palms. The firefighters were still assessing the damage. The manager stood slack-jawed near the door. People whispered, pointing in disbelief. Danny steadied himself, breathing through the adrenaline. This was why he'd moved when everyone else froze. This was why he'd run toward danger when every sane person ran away. Because somewhere in every crisis, no matter how loud, how terrifying, he heard Lena's voice in the back of his mind, soft and certain. Make it home. Make sure others do too. He looked at the wreckage one more time, watching firefighters extract the remaining injured survivors. Every life pulled from that mangled space felt like a weight lifting off his chest. He hadn't failed them. The deputy approached cautiously, as though Danny were something volatile and powerful. "Sir," the deputy said, voice unsteady. "What you just did, I've never seen anything like it." Behind him, the store manager stared red-faced and stunned, holding his useless clipboard like a shield. His earlier accusations dissolved into the dust around his shoes. The power dynamic had shifted, and everyone felt it. Danny wasn't the troublemaker anymore. He wasn't the man who ignored procedure. He was the man who had saved them. He turned toward Maya again. She was already running to him. Dusty shoes, shaking hands, tear-streaked cheeks. He caught her mid-leap and held her so tightly he could feel her heartbeat matching his. The room watched in silence. The dust still floated. The wreckage still smoldered. But in that moment, the entire stockroom, every survivor, every witness, every skeptic understood exactly who had stood between them and disaster. And this was only the beginning of the truth that would come next. Dust still drifted from the rafters long after the collapse had settled. The firefighters fanned out across the wreckage, marking unstable areas with neon tape and checking every inch for survivors. They kept glancing at Danny, quick sideways looks that carried unmistakable disbelief. A few murmured to each other as they worked. One nodded at him with the kind of respect usually reserved for veterans or first responders. The people he'd saved were being guided toward a corner of the room for medical checks. Two of them, shaken pale and covered in grit, kept staring his way like they still couldn't process how they'd avoided death by barely a foot of shifting metal. Maya stood with both arms wrapped around his waist, face buried in the dusty fabric of his shirt. He smoothed her hair absently, his hand steady, even as his insides trembled from the adrenaline come down. She hadn't let go since she'd reached him. No one asked her to. In the uneasy quiet that followed, the sheriff's deputy approached. Not with suspicion this time, but with something closer to reverence and embarrassment. "Mr. Rhodes," he began, clearing his throat like the words stuck on their way out. "The folks in this room, they owe you their lives." Danny didn't answer. Gratitude wasn't why he'd run toward the falling ceiling. It had never been why he did anything. Behind the deputy, the store manager hovered silently near the broken racks. His earlier arrogance melted clean off. His hands shook around the clipboard he still clung to, as though it could shield him from the truth he didn't want to face. The paramedic approached next, wiping debris off her scrubs. "You didn't just react fast," she said quietly. "You reacted like someone who knew exactly what was happening before it happened." Her voice didn't accuse, it invited. Other firefighters drifted closer, drawn by curiosity and something like awe. Even the boy in the wheelchair, now resting safely with his caregiver at the east wall, lifted his head and mouthed "thank you" again across the room. Danny could feel it, the shift. People who had ignored him, judged him, pushed past him, now tracked his every movement. And then the assistant store manager blurted out the question, sitting in all their eyes. "How did you know what to do?" The room fell into a hush. Danny glanced at Maya, still gripping his shirt. He felt her small fingers tighten, almost afraid of what he might say. He took a slow breath and straightened, resting one hand on her back. "I used to be a combat engineer," he said simply. U.S. Army. The words dropped into the silence like stones into deep water rippling out through the stockroom. A few gasps, a few sudden nods of understanding. The firefighters' expressions changed instantly, recognition, respect, even a bit of kinship. Danny hadn't spoken those words aloud in years. They tasted strange on his tongue, like something pulled out of storage and held to the light again after too long in the dark. The deputy blinked. Combat engineer. That's structural assessment, explosive breaching, load-bearing calculations. All that Danny said, his voice even. And you walked away from it. Danny didn't flinch. Some things are harder to walk through than away from. A beat of silence followed. It wasn't pity that crossed their faces, it was understanding. Veterans recognized that tone. Even those who had never served knew that kind of grief when they saw it. The meaning in his words didn't need to be spelled out. A firefighter stepped forward. Sir, with your skills, you just prevented a full cascade collapse. If you hadn't seen it, I did what anyone would have done, Danny said quietly. But the firefighter shook her head. No. Most people don't run into danger before they fully understand it. You moved before the ceiling even cracked open. You predicted the failure. That's not instinct. That's expertise. The store manager swallowed hard. He stepped forward, wiping the dust from his sleeves like he suddenly remembered he was supposed to look authoritative. Mr. Rhodes, I owe you an apology, he stammered. My assumptions earlier were out of line. Danny met his gaze calmly. Your people were scared. Fear makes folks say things they don't mean. The manager's face reddened even more. Fear isn't an excuse for treating a man like that. I saw you pull those customers out with my own eyes. I don't know how to repay. Danny lifted a hand, gently stopping him. Just take care of your employees. And the building, it shouldn't have failed like that. That last sentence carried weight. It wasn't scolding, it was truth spoken by someone who saw what others missed. A low murmur ran through the firefighters. One of them nudged her captain. He's right. That beam didn't fail just because of the storm. That was long-term stress, neglect. The manager winced. But before anyone could pursue it further, the fire captain approached Danny directly. What's your name again, Sir Danny Rhodes? The captain nodded slowly, as though committing it to memory. Well, Mr. Rhodes, you've got the room's attention. And mine. His tone softened. You ever think about getting back into that line of work? Structural assessment, emergency response. We could use someone who sees what you see. Danny's breath caught. He glanced at Maya, whose eyes widened with worry. She'd been only 6 when he quit the Army Depot job and took the quieter mechanic position. She'd lived through enough loss for a lifetime, and Danny had built his world around keeping things calm, predictable, safe. He looked back at the captain. My little girl is my priority, he said. Always. The captain nodded with full respect. Understood. But if you ever want a way back in something that uses your talents without putting you in danger every day, you let us know. The offer lingered in the air, like a door he didn't expect to open again. Then the deputy stepped closer, lowering his voice. There's going to be an investigation, he said, about the building's condition. Possibly about the management ignoring safety protocols. I'll need to take a statement later, but he gestured at the wreckage and the people alive because of Danny. You've turned this whole situation upside down. Danny felt something shift inside him. Not pride, not relief, but a strange gravity pulling him forward. It had been years since anyone looked at him as more than a tired mechanic or a man barely holding things together for his daughter. Years since his skills had meant anything outside a toolbox. And now, all at once, the truth stood exposed, undeniable. Maya tugged softly at his sleeve. Dad, Does this mean you're a hero?" He crouched down, brushing dust from her cheek. "Honey, a hero is just somebody who does the right thing when it's hard." She studied him with those big, earnest eyes that always seemed older than her years. "Then you're one." He didn't argue. He didn't agree either. He simply held her gaze until she leaned into him again. The assistant store manager stepped forward, voice trembling with remorse. "Mr. Rhodes, I should have listened to you. I treated you not like someone who deserved respect. I misjudged you." Danny straightened slowly. "People do that sometimes." The manager shook his head, ashamed. "No, I was wrong, and I won't forget it." A group of customers, the same ones who had rushed past him earlier, approached next. One woman broke into tears while thanking him. Another man, who had shoved by angrily in the chaos, couldn't look him in the eye as he mumbled an apology. The caregiver pushed the boy in the wheelchair forward. The boy stared up at Danny with trembling gratitude. "You ran back," he whispered, "even when the ceiling was falling." Danny rested a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "You weren't alone, that's all." Something softened in the child's eyes, something like safety. And then, as the firefighters continued to inspect the structural damage, the captain turned back to Danny. "Rhodes, you have a rare gift, seeing danger before it hits, knowing how to move people, keeping calm when the world is collapsing." He paused, letting the words sink in. Skills like that shouldn't go unused. The offer was unspoken, but unmistakable. This wasn't just gratitude. It was opportunity. A path back to something he thought he'd lost, a way to use the part of himself he'd buried after Lena's death. A way to show Maya the strength she already believed he had. But it wouldn't be simple. A job like that came with responsibility training time. It would change their lives. And as he held Maya close, he realized the real question wasn't whether he could take the job. It was whether he was ready to step into who he used to be and who he might still become. The fire captain waited, eyes steady, giving Danny space to breathe, decide, and rise into whatever came next. And that was when the deputy's radio crackled sharply. "Possible secondary collapse in the north corridor needs structural assessment before entry." The captain turned to Danny. "Rhodes, you want to do one more, just to look? You're the only one here who can see what the building's thinking." The room fell silent again. Everyone, managers, customers, deputies, paramedics, watched Danny. Not as a mechanic, not as a man to blame, but as the one person they trusted to tell them the truth. Danny exhaled, feeling the weight of their expectation and the faint, steady echo of his old life awakening inside him. Whatever he chose now would define what came next. Danny didn't answer right away. He looked down at Maya, her face streaked with dust and tears, but her eyes bright with a trust so absolute it rooted him to the moment. She didn't look afraid anymore. She looked proud, like she'd finally seen the part of her father that he'd tried so hard to bury. He kissed the top of her head, squeezed her shoulders gently, then handed her to the paramedic. "Stay with her," he said. "I'll be right back." Maya nodded, breath trembling but steady. When Danny stepped toward the north corridor, the fire captain fell in beside him. The deputy followed. A dozen onlookers watched with a reverence that hadn't been in their eyes an hour earlier. The store manager who had barked orders, dismissed warnings, and tried to pin responsibility on Danny stood small and humbled near the wall. He didn't try to speak. He didn't need to. His silence was apology enough. Inside the corridor, emergency lights flickered over broken drywall and buckled ceiling panels. Danny traced his fingers lightly across a cracked support post, feeling the subtle vibration in the metal. He listened, really listened to the groans of the compromised frame. The building spoke in tiny shifts and shivers, and he understood its language the way some men understood engines. He turned to the captain. "We've got time. Not much, but enough. Nobody goes past those freezers. Reinforce the eastern joist and redirect entry through the loading dock. The pressure's migrating north, not east." The captain relayed the instructions immediately, without question. And for the first time in a long time, Danny wasn't someone trying to keep his head down. He was someone people depended on. 20 minutes later, every surviving employee, customer, and first responder was safely out of the store. The fire captain clapped Danny on the back with a sincere, heavy gratitude that said more than words ever could. "You saved more lives than you know," she said. "And I'd be honored if you'd consider working with us in a consulting role. Flexible hours, paid training. You pick your schedule. You've got a rare gift, Danny. Let us put it to use." He didn't accept right away. He didn't decline either. But something in him, something long dormant, stirred at the offer. In the parking lot, Maya ran into his arms. He lifted her easily despite the ache settling in his shoulders. She studied his face for a long moment. "You did good," she whispered. He hugged her tight, something old and heavy finally unclenching inside him. The store manager approached, hands wrung together, face drawn with remorse. "Mr. Rhodes, sir, I'm so sorry for how I treated you. I was wrong, and I'll make that clear in the report." Danny nodded. Not forgiving, not condemning, just accepting the moment for what it was, a man learning he'd misjudged another. Over the next hour, investigators arrived. Statements were taken. The building was cordoned off. And even as the chaos wound down, people still approached Danny just to say thank you. Some hugged him. Some shook his hand. Some simply stared at him with tears in their eyes. He never quite knew what to say, but Maya did. She would announce proudly to anyone who'd listen, "My dad keeps people safe." And somehow that always seemed to be enough. 3 months later, the city held a small ceremony inside the refurbished community center. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. Just neighbors, first responders, and a few dozen familiar faces from the store that day. The fire captain called Danny to the front and presented him with a framed certificate recognizing his exceptional valor and structural expertise during a civilian emergency. The applause lasted longer than he was comfortable with. Maya clapped hardest, beaming. By then, Danny had taken the consulting job. 1 or 2 days a week, he worked alongside the fire department, assessing older buildings, training new recruits in basic collapse awareness, and helping the city rewrite emergency protocols. The rest of the week, he still fixed buses at the depot. But he walked into that job standing a little taller now. People treated him differently, not because of medals or praise, but because purpose has a way of sharpening a man's outline in the world. He and Maya moved to a slightly bigger apartment. Nothing fancy, but with a sunny bedroom she decorated with drawings of fire engines, sturdy beams, and cartoon versions of her dad holding up buildings like a superhero. She told him once, while coloring in her sketchbook, "Mom would be proud you help people again." He didn't answer right away, just kissed the top of her head and let the warmth in her voice fill the quiet corners of his chest. The boy in the wheelchair and his caregiver visited twice to say thank you. The deputy stopped by the depot now and then to bring coffee and talk baseball. Even the store manager wrote a letter to the city council taking responsibility for the safety issues that had contributed to the collapse. People grew. People learned. Some apologized. Life moved forward. But every so often, when thunderstorms rolled across Oklahoma and lightning lit the sky in white flashes, Maya would crawl onto the couch beside him, blanket tucked to her chin. "Tell me again," she'd say softly, "what you heard that day before it fell." And Danny would describe the beam groaning the ceiling, breathing the way danger speaks in the small moments before disaster. She listened wide-eyed every time, soaking in the quiet courage beneath his words. Then she'd rest her head on his shoulder and whisper, "I'm glad you were there." Danny always answered the same way. "I'm glad I was too." Because somewhere between the storm and the collapse, between the accusations and the gratitude, he'd remembered something he thought he'd lost the day Lena died. A man can grieve and still be strong. A man can be scared and still step forward. A man can have nothing and still save everything that matters. And sometimes the greatest rescue isn't the one you perform for strangers. It's the one that pulls you back into the life you were meant to live.